You're no longer welcome here." Those were the last words my father said to me, as he stood in the doorway, jaw clenched, fists shaking not with fear, but with shame, and behind him, my mother, silent tears in her eyes, but not for me, for what they thought people would say. I was 17, pregnant, scared out of my mind. Before we continue, please write in the comments which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. I wasn't a bad kid, never got in trouble. Honor roll student, varsity tennis, always home by curfew. But one mistake, that's all it took to lose everything. His name was Ryan. He wasn't my boyfriend, just someone I thought I could trust. That trust turned into a secret. That secret turned into 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. And that test became the weapon my parents used to cut me out of their lives. "You'll ruin our reputation," my dad had said. "We're church people. What will Pastor Grant think?" I didn't care what the pastor thought. I was still their daughter. I was still me, but to them, I had become a stain they had to scrub away. They didn't offer a plan. They didn't offer help. They didn't even offer a ride. They just told me to leave. So, I packed what I could, shoved it into a garbage bag, and left the only home I had ever known with nothing but $42 in my wallet, my school backpack, and a baby growing inside me. It was February, cold. I remember my breath fogging up the window of the bus as I rode to nowhere. That night, I slept in the women's restroom of a 24-hour gas station, curled up on the tile floor, using my jacket as a pillow. The next day, I walked into a teen shelter downtown. They gave me food, a bed, and a social worker named Vanessa. She was the first adult who didn't look at me like I had failed. She said, "You're not broken. You're just at the beginning." I didn't believe her. Not then, but I clung to her words anyway. The shelter had rules, curfews, chores, group therapy. It wasn't easy. I had morning sickness during tutoring sessions. I cried in the shower where no one could hear me. I missed my mum's voice, even the smell of my dad's cologne in the hallway. But I kept going, because now, it wasn't just about me. I got a part-time job at a diner bussing table. Saved every tip. Vanessa helped me enroll in a GED program. And when the time came 9 months later, I gave birth to a little girl with the whitest brown eyes I'd ever seen. I named her Hope, because she was the one thing they hadn't taken from me. I was 18, alone, terrified. But for the first time since that night on the porch, I also felt strong. Hope gave me purpose. She cried a lot those first few months. So did I, but every time I looked at her, I promised, "You'll never feel unwanted, not by me." I didn't think I'd ever see my parents again. Didn't think they'd want to, but I was wrong, because 15 years later, there was a knock on my door, and on the other side, stood the very people who had turned their backs on me. The knock was soft, almost hesitant, but something about it felt familiar. I peeked out the window, not expecting anything, maybe a neighbor, maybe a delivery. Instead, my heart nearly stopped. It was them. My father, hair more silver than I remembered, standing stiff like he always did. And beside him, my mother, clutching her purse like a shield, her eyes darting around nervously, like she wasn't sure she even wanted to be there. For a moment, I just stood frozen, holding my breath. Hope, now 15, called from the kitchen, "Mum, everything okay?" Didn't know what to say. I hadn't spoken their names aloud in years. Not once had they called, written, or tried to reach out, not for birthdays, holidays. Not even when Hope was in the hospital for a bad case of pneumonia at age 6, that had disappeared, like I never existed. And now, they were on my porch. I opened the door slowly. My dad spoke first. "Can we come in?" His voice was rougher, older, but that same commanding tone still lingered, like he expected me to fall in line. I didn't move. "Why are you here?" He looked at my mum. She didn't speak. She just stared at the floor, biting her lip like she was holding something back. "We were in town," he said. I almost laughed. In town, after 15 years. Then my mother finally looked up. Her eyes met mine. They were red, teary, and, for the first time, ashamed. Your aunt passed, she whispered. We were going through some of her things. She had photos of you, of Hope. Letters you sent her. Letters, of course. Aunt Carol, my dad's younger sister, was the only one who'd stayed in touch. Secretly, carefully, she'd mail birthday cards. Little gift boxes for Hope, always from a friend. I guess now that Carol was gone, the truth had spilled. Out you knew, I said to my mum. You knew she was helping me. And you never said a word. Her voice cracked. He didn't let me. My father tensed. It was complicated. No, it wasn't, I snapped. You made a choice. You kicked your daughter out because you cared more about your image than your family. And now, what? You want a tour? A hug? A do-over? Hope appeared behind me, curious. Mum, who is it? I turned, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Just some people I used to know, but she had already seen them. Her eyes flicked from my face to theirs. Are those your parents? Silence. My dad's eyes softened just a little. She's beautiful, he said. Looks just like you did at her age. Hope blinked, confused. You're my grandparents. No one answered. That moment so simple, so fragile hung heavy in the air. 15 years of silence, swallowed. Up by 3 people who didn't know how to move forward. I think it's best if you leave, I said quietly. This isn't your home. My mother's face crumpled. Please, just a few minutes. We don't want anything, we just wanted to see you, and hers. Just once. But I wasn't sure if that was true. Because beneath the sadness in their eyes, I saw something else. Regret, yes. But also, desperation. And something told me this visit wasn't just about making peace, something told me. They had a reason to show up now after all these years, something they weren't telling me. I closed the door, not with a slam. Not with anger, just a quiet push that said, no. Hope stood beside me, confused, watching me closely. Were those really your parents? I nodded slowly. Why didn't they come around before? That question stung. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because it reminded me how much she didn't. They were ashamed of me, of you, she frowned. Of me, why? Knelt in front of her. You didn't do anything wrong, honey. Sometimes people make terrible choices when they're scared of what others might think. She thought about that for a while. Did they come to say sorry? I paused. Maybe. But it didn't feel like the whole truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. Their visit stirred something. A storm of old wounds, half-healed scars, and questions. Why now? Why, after 15 years of complete silence, would they suddenly drive across the state just to look at us through a screen door? What were they not saying? The next morning, as I walked to Hope to school, I noticed a car parked across the street. A grey sedan, tinted windows. It wasn't ours. It didn't belong to any neighbor. It was the same one my parents had pulled up in, and it didn't move. The same car showed up again the next afternoon. Then the next. Always there, always idle, never coming to the door. I haven't panicked yet. But I started writing down the license plate, taking photos, just in case. Then I got the letter. No return address, no name. Just a white envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a single sentence. They aren't here to apologize. I stared at the words for a long time. My hands shook. No signature, no explanation. Just that. Hope was in the living room, doing her homework, laughing at something on her tablet, oblivious to the growing shadow outside our little world. That night, I dug out the box from under my bed, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were old photos, hospital bills, court documents, and at the bottom, a journal. My journal, the one I kept during the year after I was kicked out. I flipped through it, page after page of scribbled heartbreak, fear, isolation, and a single entry that suddenly made my stomach twist. Dad kept the house deed in a fireproof box in the study. Always paranoid someone would come for it. The house deed. I remembered now before I left, Grandpa had given the lake house to me, signed it over in my name before his health went downhill. I was only 18, it was a quiet gift, his way of saying, "You'll need this." I had completely forgotten, I never lived there. Never even visited again. Until now. Could that be it? Were they here? For the house? Suddenly, it all made sense. The timing, the visit, the desperation in their eyes. I pulled out the deed. Sure enough, my name, clear as day. They had nothing left. And now they wanted what was mine. My phone buzzed. Another message. This time, a text from a blocked number. "Meet us tomorrow, 10 a.m., alone. You owe us that much." I stared at the message for a long time. Meet us tomorrow, 10 a.m. alone. You owe us that much. My throat tightened. Oh, I owe them. They had thrown me out with a trash bag and a warning. You made your bed, now lie in it. And now, after 15 years of silence, they thought I owed them something. But the curiosity burned too deeply. I couldn't ignore the pull of it. Not after the strange car, the unspoken tension in their visit. And now this cryptic message. So, the next morning, I left Hope with my neighbor and drove to the address they texted. It was a half-abandoned dinner, off Highway 17, one of those roadside spots that probably used to be cheerful in the 70s but now looked like a scene from a forgotten film. The blinds were down, the neon sign blinked open in a stuttering hum. I parked, took a deep breath, and walked in. They were already there. Sitting in a booth at the back, Dad looked older, frailer. His hands trembled slightly as he stirred his coffee. Mum's hair was grey now, pulled back tight. Lips pressed so firmly together, they almost disappeared. Neither stood when I approached. They didn't even look surprised when I showed up. I slid into the booth, silence. Finally, Mum broke it. "You look different." 15 years will do that, I said flatly. Dad leaned forward. "We need to talk. About the house." He blinked, and his mouth opened just slightly, but he didn't respond. "You've been watching us. Sitting in that car, send me letters, and now this. If you want the house, say it." Mum exhaled, annoyed. "It's not about the house, really." I raised an eyebrow. Dad looked around, then pulled out a small manila envelope and slid it across the table. "What's this?" I asked, not touching it. "Proof," he said. "Of who's really after you." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "We weren't the ones watching you," he whispered. "We came because we were warned." That didn't make sense. None of this made sense. Mum finally leaned forward. "There's something we never told you. About your grandfather." I opened the envelope. Inside, there were black and white photographs. Old, grainy, but clear enough. One showed Grandpa shaking hands with a man in a military uniform. Another photo of a basement, a concrete floor, shelves of what looked like old tech recorders, tapes, files, and one final photo. A ledger, names, codes, large sums of money. "What is this?" I asked. "Your grandfather wasn't just some quiet old man who fixed clocks and read newspapers," Dad said. "He worked for the government. A project that no one was supposed to know about," Mum added. "When he died, he left everything to you, including what they think is hidden in that house." My head spun. "Wait, who are they?" Dad's voice dropped. "We don't know exactly, but they've been trying to track down what your grandfather kept hiding. Your name's on the deed. That makes you a target." The room felt suddenly too quiet. The fluorescent light above us buzzed faintly. I whispered, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Mum's hands shook as she sipped her coffee. "We thought by cutting you off, we were protecting you. Keeping you away from everything tied to him." "You didn't protect me," I said. "You abandoned me." They didn't respond. Outside, I noticed the same gray sedan parked across the street. The same car, still watching, and for the first time, it didn't seem like it belonged to my parents at all. Something else was happening here, and I was in the center of it. I clutched the envelope tighter as I drove home. The photos, the ledger, the strange way my parents looked at MIT, all buzzed in my head like static. None of it felt real. But the gray sedan in the rearview mirror was real. It had followed me all the way back from the dinner. keeping its distance but never letting me out of its sight. By the time I parked in front of the house, my heart was pounding. Hope ran out the front door, her curls bouncing with every step. "Mom, you're back." I bent down and hugged her tight. Tighter than usual. "Are you okay?" she asked, sensing something in my arms. I smiled, or tried to. "I am now." That night, after putting Hope to bed, I sat at the dining table with the envelope in front of me. I kept staring at Grandpa's handwriting on the ledger. One name stood out underlined twice, with a code next to it, Karen 6. It meant nothing to me. I turned the pages repeatedly, hoping something would click. Then I remembered. A week after Grandpa passed away, the real estate agent had given me a folder of his old house documents. Tucked inside had been a map of the property. I ran to the drawer where I kept it. There it was, yellowed, folded, but intact. And right there on the bottom corner, tinny, faded writing in pencil: C6 Boiler Room, West Wall, C6 Coron, 6. I grabbed a flashlight and headed down into the basement. The air was musty and cold, filled with memories of Grandpa's workbench and oil-stained tools. The boiler sat in the corner like a sleeping beast. I tapped along the west wall until I heard it hollow knock. My heart raced. I scraped away the layer of paint and found a square panel barely noticeable. With effort, I pried it open. Inside was a dusty metal box with a lock. I pulled it out, brought it upstairs, and stared at it under the kitchen light. The keyhole looked old. But then I remembered the grandfather clock in the hallway hadn't worked since the day Grandpa died. I grabbed the winding key and tried it. Click. The lock popped open. Inside papers, blueprints, an old cassette tape, and a small velvet pouch. Inside the pouch, a flash drive. Modern, newer than everything else. I plugged it into my laptop. A video popped up. It was Grandpa, sitting in his old chair. "If you're watching this," he began, "it means they found out. Or they're close. What I left in this house could change lives or ruin them. That choice is now yours." He went on to explain the project. A surveillance system he helped design during the Cold War. It was never deactivated, just hidden. Someone had been using it again, selling information, tracking people, illegally, and it was linked to a corporate name I recognized from the ledger: Promethea Technologies. The company was still around, and powerful Grandpa had proof: audio, files, and locations, all stored on that drive. I looked back at the ledger. Promethea had paid someone off with my last name. I scrolled further, my father's name, and next to it, consultant fee, $85. Suddenly, everything clicked. They hadn't cut me off to protect me. They'd distanced themselves to protect themselves. They'd taken money to stay quiet. And when Grandpa left everything to me, including the secrets, someone got nervous that someone might have been following me the whole time. I made 3 copies of the flash drive that night. One I mailed to a lawyer friend in DC. Second I hid in the safest place I knew, Hope's school locker. No one would look there. The third I kept close. The next day, I stood outside my parents' hotel. They were already waiting for me in the lobby. Dad looked tired. Mom seemed restless. "I know everything," I said. "Promethea, the money, the surveillance, Grandpa's work." Their faces fell. "I won't go public. Not yet," I continued. "But if you ever come near my daughter Agenor, try to take this house, I will." Dad tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "Don't. Just leave." Again they stood quietly, and they left. This time, for good. Hope and I stood in the front yard later that afternoon. She looked up at me. "Are they gone?" I smiled. "Yeah, kiddo, they're gone." She squeezed my hand. "Good." And just like that, we turned around and walked back inside the house Grandpa built with all its secrets and all its strength. But this time, we weren't afraid of the shadows anymore. We'd learned to live with the truth, and we were ready for whatever came next.